everyone, so today I'm going to be doing my manga reading wrap up for March and April of 2024. So last time I did this, I also did a combination of 2 months of January and February, and first I talked about some statistics that I wanted to share with you, and I'm going to do the same thing this time. So we're going to jump over first and see some statistics. If you don't care about the statistics, everything will be timestamped, so you can go ahead and skip to my thoughts on the books. So let's go ahead and look at those. Okay, so here's my spreadsheet. We're going to be looking at my overall stats for the year as they are right now, as well as my stats for March and April. So we can see over here, obviously I like tracking how many manga I have left on my TBR. This number, 217, has not changed in a while. It's been around there for a couple months, but that's because I've been buying too much stuff, not because I haven't been reading. But let's go to my monthly stats. We will look at March first. Actually, let's take a look at February and how I was doing in February, which is decidedly not well. If you recall, I'd only read 18 books in February with 4,353 pages. That is a horrible, horrible reading month for February. So I was a little worried that March was going to continue in that way, but luckily it did not. March was back on track. Here we go. So March is pretty much the exact same as January in terms of books and pages read. Very, very similar. I will say though that the quality of the books I was reading were not amazing. I think it was pretty similar to February. It's just the fact that I read way more books in March made it seem like not as bad. So we can see here, I mean, there are still lots of 3 stars and 4 stars, but my average rating was a 3.4, which is a little bit lower than average for me. And I never really want to have that many 3 stars. I'd rather they be more 4 stars, but whatever. In terms of genres, I think the majority of them were sci-fi and psychological. Psychological, again, is a very vague genre, but it's how I describe quite a few things that I read, so that's pretty typical. More sci-fi than usual, but I do really enjoy sci-fi. The books that I read, 53 were manga and then 4 novels. We will take a look at that in April because that's interesting. 21 ebooks and 36 physical. I was trying out a lot of things on K-manga. In fact, there's one series I read 10 volumes of. I'm not even going to talk about it in this video because it wasn't very good. It doesn't even need to be mentioned because it's a very old series and no one's really going to read it anyway. But that's what a lot of these ebooks are. The subgenre here is interesting. I usually don't look at this, but look at that, 23 thriller. I know exactly what those are. In terms of demographics, this is pretty normal. I tend to neglect shoujo and josei, not like on purpose. It just happens with the manga I pick up. So usually I have a little bit more seinen than shonen. This time it's the other way around, but that's okay. And yeah, that's all I want to look at for March. Now let's look at April and see if anything's changed. So we can see the number of books I read definitely went down from March. That's okay though, I'm not mad about it because if we jump over here real quick, you can see that I read 3 novels and 4 novellas. If you recall, my goal is to read 2 novels or novellas every month. So obviously 7 is a lot better than 2. So I'm not mad about this number being lower. In terms of average rating, 3.6 is exactly my usual average rating and lots of 4 stars here. So that all makes sense. This is a pretty typical thing for me. I don't really give 1 stars anymore, not because I am opposed to giving 1 stars. It's just I tend to know my tastes pretty well. Me picking up something that I think I will like and end up giving it a 1 star is so very rare. It really doesn't happen. Although 5 stars seem to be just as rare this year. I have not given very many 5 stars at all. I think a lot of people, at least this year I've seen quite a few people saying that they feel like that they're not rating things critically enough and they're trying to lower the number of 5 stars they give. I feel like I need to do the opposite and reevaluate how I rate things and maybe give more things 5 stars because I don't give 5 stars. At least not this year. I have not been giving very many. Anyway, in terms of genres for April, I've had quite a few fantasy. Those are mostly books, I think, but quite a few fantasy. It's a good mix of things here. Sci-fi, thriller. I do sometimes like to take a look at the published year for the books I'm reading. So pretty typically 2023 and 2024 have the highest number. Actually, 2022 is pretty high up there right now as well, but I did want to just mention that I did read a book from 1872 in April. So that's pretty cool. It's kind of funny because for the manga, when I'm putting in these stats, I put the published date from when the English version was published, not the Japanese version. But the book I read, obviously the version I read, was not published in 1872. It was a newer version, but I put the original date for novels. So also I just wanted 1872 on my stats, and I think that's funny. I don't know how to format it, so this is like not on the outside, but I don't want to mess with it, so I'll just leave it. It doesn't really bother me. My yearly goals, let's see how those are going. So I've been able to cross off quite a few things. This month I crossed off Thermae Romae here. In May, I'm planning on reading The Heroic Legend of Arslan. So this is all very attainable for me. Over here, my top reading goals, read all completed manga. I'm getting there. I need to stop buying manga first, or at least stop buying so many manga, and then I can tackle that. Read 2 novels per month. I already talked about that. I'm doing very, very well. I will definitely succeed at that goal. Next, there are 6 series I said I was going to reread in 2024. I have not read any of them, and honestly, I kind of don't think I'm going to even try to tackle that goal. If I'm focusing more on the novels instead of that, I'm perfectly fine with not reaching this goal. It's okay if I'm reading more novels instead. Plus, I want to explore more digital manga, like through Viz or Shonen Jump or the K-Manga app. So at this point, like, it's still a goal I have, but probably not all 6 series are going to get read. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to look at here in terms of my stats. So now let's jump ahead into my thoughts on the manga that I read the last 2 months. Alright, so now back to all the manga I read throughout March and April. I'm not going to talk about anything that I already discussed in a reading vlog. Usually my thoughts on those are very short and there's no need to repeat myself, so if you're curious about those, you can go ahead and watch some of my last videos. And anything I didn't feel like I had very strong opinions about, I kind of just skip talking about. So we're going to talk about some of the highlights. Most of them are very good, actually. Definitely some new favorites. There weren't too many that I really hated. In fact, I can't even think of many that I really hated. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So the first manga I want to talk about is My Dearest Self with Malice Aforethought, which, again, I really hate that title. I did start talking about this one in a reading vlog a couple weeks ago, maybe more than a month ago at this point, but I said I was going to share my thoughts about the rest of the series with you, so that's what I'm here to do. Last time, I think I talked about everything through Volume 4, and that's where I stopped. And unfortunately, I feel like the ending of Volume 4 was kind of the highlight of the series. Everything after that, while it was definitely exciting and there were lots of big reveals, I really didn't love the direction it decided to go in. I feel like it had the potential to go for so many interesting things, different storytelling devices that we don't see too often, but instead I felt like I read a story that I've seen many, many times before. And a lot of the story, like a lot of it, is told through flashbacks, especially in the second half. A lot of the reveals are showed through flashbacks, and that's not the most exciting reading experience for like a suspense mystery thriller series like this. I also feel like it's not the best to learn about characters through a flashback rather than in the present day storyline, so that was a little disappointing as well. But as I mentioned, it definitely was full of twists and turns. It was very suspenseful. It was a very, very quick read. I read it in just a few days, the entire series, but it's probably not something I'm going to think about too often in the future, and I feel like that happens a lot with these digital only Kodansha manga that are like mystery, thriller, horror. They're all a little bit forgetful, or the vast majority of them are anyway, and unfortunately this one fell into that. But it was an okay way to spend a few days reading manga. I do like it when I can binge through a series that quickly, so that's something going for it. Next, I read volumes 1 through 3, the complete series of Genkaku Picasso. This is by Usumaru Furuya, who I have read from several times before. I feel like all of his series are very different. This one is about a young boy who is involved in a freak accident that ends up killing one of his classmates. After this accident, he realizes that he has these mysterious powers that allow him, through his art, to kind of explore the subconscious of other people, and he realizes that he basically has to help out his classmates. He is forced to, or else he will literally start rotting away. His skin on his arms will start rotting. What follows is this kind of loner kid reluctantly making friends because he's kind of forced into it as he helps them with whatever is weighing on their minds. Some of the stories or episodes are a little darker than others. Overall, I definitely enjoyed this manga. I was a little bit worried because the first volume, while I liked it, I wasn't blown away by it, but I feel like the story kept getting better each volume. It is a little bit episodic just because of the nature of the series, but it does have an overarching plot with our main character here. And I'm always a sucker for a manga about a kid who's really a loner, has no friends, basically making friends and realizing that he appreciates his friends. I know it's corny, but I like to read about it. As you would guess, the art is very important for a story like this that relies so much on the main character drawing and reflecting the minds of the people around him. You need the art to look really nice, and it does look very, very good in this manga. Well, I feel like all of Usumaru Furuya's works so far have had really good art, but in here it really stands out just because of the nature of the series. But I really enjoyed the way everything came together at the end, and it made for a really emotional conclusion, which I was not expecting at all. But overall, I would say this was a really great short series. It isn't very often where I read a series that's 3 volumes long, and it leaves a lasting impact on me, or makes me think that I'm going to be wanting to reread it in the future. For some reason, 3-volume series are almost always forgettable for me, but this one was not at all. I'm definitely going to think about this in the future and reread it, and I had a great time with it. Next, just like many other people, I also read all of Alice in Borderland in March. Volume 1 was a reread, but everything after that was new material to me, and I had completely avoided spoilers, so I had a really great time with the series. But if you don't know, this is a very highly entertaining Death Games manga. We follow our main character, Alice, or Arisu, and he is 18 years old. He's kind of a loser. His family has expectations for him that he is not interested in following. He really has no direction in life. But eventually him and 2 of his friends get trapped in this Death Games universe. They don't know what's going on. All the people around them have disappeared, or almost all of them, and they are basically forced to participate in these death games. I had a fantastic time with this. I really enjoy this type of story. It's very suspenseful and interesting for me to read. This one in particular, I feel like it could have been 30 volumes long, and I still would have enjoyed it just as much as the 18 volumes that we did receive. Each game is really exciting, and it's interesting to see the characters work together or not to solve the problem that they're presented with. I also like the addition of the side stories. As you get through the series, there are more and more of those, and I kind of was thinking that I wasn't going to like them, but it does kind of make the world more rich and interesting. You can see other characters besides our main character also struggle with the same things and also fight for survival. As for the ending, it definitely does get a bit philosophical, but that didn't really bother me because I feel like that's what the author wanted to explore with this manga. Kind of stereotypical, what's the meaning of life? What are we doing here on Earth? What is our purpose? That sort of thing. But as for the actual ending, I thought it was very satisfying. I really love that we get an explanation for what is going on, but that doesn't mean everything is explained. I feel like if they tried to explain everything, it just would have felt forced and just not realistic. So leaving it a little bit open-ended while still giving us enough answers to be satisfied, I felt like was a really great way to do the ending here. And so yeah, definitely a really great manga if you can deal with the subject matter. Very entertaining story, memorable characters, and this is one I will definitely be revisiting in the future. So that was everything for March. Then I moved on to April, obviously. This is another series that I talked about very briefly in a reading vlog, but I want to talk about it more because I read some more volumes of it. That was Delicious in Dungeon. This is volume 8. At this point, I've read through volume 8. I'm trying very hard to read this slowly because I didn't realize that volume 14 was the final volume. If I'd known that, I definitely would have waited to read it because at this point, I'm just really wanting to read all the volumes I have, but I know if I read volume 13 right now and I have to wait until July for volume 14, I will be very annoyed with myself. So I'm trying to take things slow. It doesn't work very well for me, but I'm trying. And this is just a really fantastically fun fantasy manga. When I first started it, I was expecting it to be just like a slice of life cooking manga, them catching monsters in the dungeons and cooking them, but it is way deeper than that. It has fantastic, lovable characters. Pretty much all of the characters are memorable, even like the side characters we don't see that often, but especially our main cast. They've all got their quirks, they're all a little weird and deranged, but they're all very lovable. The world building is incredible. I love how the dungeon has its own ecosystem and food chain, and how eating or affecting one monster will affect the other monsters throughout the dungeon in ways that you might not be expecting. The monsters are also just really cool. Some of them are a little bit derpy, some of them are genuinely scary, and I think they're all very interesting to learn about. There's even some politics relating to the dungeon, which I was not expecting at all. The fact that we learn about outside the dungeon as well as inside the dungeon is really great. And if that wasn't enough, there are some action scenes in here that are very high stakes. I was kind of on the edge of my seat reading it. So that seems like a lot to tackle in just 14 volumes, but somehow this is able to balance all of that out perfectly without seeming rushed or bogged down or anything. So suffice to say, I'm having a fantastic time with the series. I'm really, really glad I tried it out again. At the heart of it, it's just a group of adventurers trying really hard to save their friend. And yeah, fantastic series so far. Obviously, I'm not finished with it yet. I'm only about halfway through, but if it continues the way it's going, or even maybe gets any better, this will definitely be one of my new favorite series. I know a lot more people are picking this up because the anime has been releasing, but if you haven't yet, I would definitely check this out if it sounds interesting to you. I'm definitely enjoying it. Next, I read the Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service. I read the first 2 omnibuses. So this is one I had really gone in knowing absolutely nothing except for that it was a horror manga. And while it definitely does have horror and creepy elements, I would say this is more a supernatural manga. Very episodic. This one is more episodic than the other episodic series I've been talking about. But this follows a strange group of people who transport dead bodies where they want to go. Each member of the group has their own unique talents. There's a girl who is trained in embalming, which is pretty rare in Japan. There's a guy who is able to find dead bodies, and there's even another guy who for some reason has a sock puppet that's like possessed by an alien. He's very strange. But our main character is a guy who can speak to the dead bodies, or the spirits that once lived in the dead bodies, and the spirits tell him where they want to go. Together, they all try to do this job and hopefully make a living, although they are definitely failing at that part of it. But this series is pretty fun so far. I tried to read it slowly because it is so episodic. I was reading about 1 omnibus per week, but even then I felt like I was getting a little bit burnt out with it. So I'm probably only going to be reading 1 omnibus a month at this point. There is kind of an overarching mystery storyline with our main character. He's kind of followed by his own spirit, and we don't really know what's going on with that. There's some hints, but we're not really sure yet. Also, the releases for this from Dark Horse are very, very slow. The next omnibus, Omnibus 6, keeps getting pushed back, so there's really no rush for me to read this series. I do, of course, really like when it gets closer to that horror style that I enjoy, so I am enjoying it, but it's not my new favorite thing, and I don't feel like a rush to read the next volume. And then finally, I of course participated in the one-shot readathon, as I said I was going to, and I read 12 one-shots, if I can even hold these up properly. So I read 12 one-shots. I'm going to talk about the highlights and the lowlights from all these. Those are not in any particular order, by the way. That's just the way I had to stack them in order to not drop them all over the floor. So probably the best thing that I read throughout the week was Thermae Romae. I mean, it can't really compare. It's not really fair because these other series, I mean, they're all one-shots, and this is a whole 6-volume series. So it has a lot more time to work through the themes and stuff that it's trying to accomplish. And yeah, this was just really fun. I do find Rome interesting, and the fact that it's about bats wasn't boring to me. It was actually pretty interesting. It's also really funny watching our main character kind of see modern Japan. I mean, he's from Rome, so it's obviously very shocking to him. But yeah, not much to say here. It's a fun series. I don't like this hardcover volume. It's obviously very hard for me to hold it up and talk about it, but I do like the way this is displayed, so maybe I'll figure out a way to display it on my shelf like this. But I had a fun time with the series. I'm definitely going to be rereading it in the future, So yeah, I'm glad I read it for this readathon. Some other standouts were All My Darling Daughters by Fumi Yoshinaga. Fumi Yoshinaga has to be in my top 5 favorite mangaka. I've really enjoyed all of her works that I've read so far, and this one was no exception. This is kind of a short story collection. It kind of has an overarching plot. Aside from one story in here that I didn't love, all the other ones were interesting. If you couldn't tell, it's about mothers and daughters and their complex relationships, and I thought it was very well done. And then another highlight was F. So this is a very interesting manga. It's kind of an alternate history after the 2011 earthquake and tsunami disasters and kind of the nuclear meltdowns. Anyway, Tohoku has decided to secede from Japan because they really hate the way that they were treated by Tokyo. So they are fighting Japan, but also internally they have more conflicts with this group called F. But we follow a reporter from Britain who is going in to kind of investigate, but then he gets caught up in the action. This is fiction, but the essay at the end kind of adds some more context to what the author is trying to say. So I thought this was very interesting. It was a lot more exciting than I thought it would be, pretty suspenseful, so definitely one I enjoyed. So pretty much everything else on that stack are ones that I enjoyed, but aren't going to be my new favorite thing or anything, except for these two that I'm going to talk about. These were the only two that I actively disliked, so overall I would say it was pretty successful, but Stitches, unfortunately, this was not good. It's very, very short stories, and they're kind of more like unsolved mysteries. If you've ever watched like an unsolved mystery documentary or something, and then you get to the end and you're like, wait, you didn't tell me what happened because it's not solved. That's what this is, except they're all just very short, like 3 or 4 page stories. The only one in here out of the 9 stories plus the manga that I enjoyed was story number 8. I mean, the manga was fine, but story number 8 was definitely the creepiest, and I definitely think that's aided by Junji Ito's art. I don't think it would have been as scary without that, but the other stories are just whatever. I mean, there were a couple that were okay, but for the most part, this was not very good. However, it's staying in my collection because of the cover. I mean, it's tiny, so it doesn't take up a lot of space, but come on. I'm not going to stop talking about this cover. Anyway, the other one I didn't like at all was Takopi's Original Sin. I told you all I wasn't going to like it, and I was correct. I didn't like it. This is pretty much just sad and depressing over and over and over and over again for the entire volume. And while I do read a lot of dark things, for some reason when it's just tonally so down and sad, I don't like reading those. I understood what the author was going for here, and I don't even think that they failed to accomplish that. I just don't like reading stories that are so sad. I have a very hard time believing that all these kids are in the situation and that they do the things that they do. I'm trying to be vague because these kids are very, very young, and I just feel like it doesn't make a lot of sense. The things they choose to do, the situations they get stuck in, I don't know. I didn't like this. I knew I wasn't going to like it. I shouldn't have bought it. I'm done buying things that are very hyped up if I think I won't like them. There's sometimes where I will pick up something because I'm not sure if I'm going to like it, but then there's stuff like this where I only picked it up because so many people said that it was very good, even though I knew I wasn't going to like it. And I've been doing that a couple times recently, and it just needs to stop. So I'm done picking up things because of peer pressure. But yeah, that was everything I wanted to talk about in this video. If you have any thoughts about any of the manga I mentioned today, please leave those comments down below. Whether you agreed with me or disagreed with me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. In terms of my TBR for May, I don't think I'm going to be doing a TBR video. I do have an idea of what I want to read, obviously. Maybe I will post a TBR on my Instagram. We'll see, but that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!